Hi guys, welcome back. So I've had a busy weekend doing a bit of integration of my setup here at home. So what I did have was a separate setup for my home practice times and what I'm running through to play for you today. So it made sense to try and sort of bring those two together, and hopefully that'll improve the sound that I give to you and the consistency of that. And it got me to thinking about how to practice most efficiently at home. And I wanted to bring forth a few tips for you. Not by no means rules or anything like that, but just some guidelines about how I practice at home and what I do, and sort of some guidelines towards making that time efficient for you. So I've got 6 tips for you today, and the first one, if you take nothing away from else from this video, do this, please do this. Get a stand for your bass and have it out in the room. Seriously, this is the best practice tip that I can possibly give to you. When I started out, I had my bass and a carry bag for it, and I brought it home and it sat in the corner. And when I had a lesson coming up, I had to quickly get it out and learn what I was supposed to have learned for that lesson, and then it went back in the bag again. And I soon realized that while there was a physical barrier of the bass being in the bag, there was also a psychological barrier there that the bass was not there ready for me to grab and play. And the day that I brought home my first guitar stand, I put it out, and then every now and then throughout that day, I picked it up and just played with it a bit, and then put it down, and then picked it up again and noodled on it for a while, and that became my thing. I picked up the bass every single day, numerous times every single day, just because it was there and ready to go, and that just makes life so much easier. So please get a stand. They're not expensive. You can get one for a tenner or less, most likely online now. So please get a stand. Point two is have some sort of setup at home where you can hear yourself properly. Now, the ideal of this is to have a nice big amp and play loudly, and have a sound system blaring music you want to play along to. But a lot of the time, we have neighbors in close proximity, and we just can't really do that. But there are ways and means around that. If you really have your heart set on playing through an amp at home, you can get some great tiny little amps that don't put out a lot of volume but sound good. And a lot of the time they have a second input that you can run music into the amp as well to play along to. And they're just really, really efficient. I've got a little tiny Mark bass amp that I use sometimes at home. And it's great. But what I use most of all is a setup where I can just run into headphones, and then I am completely silent to the outside world, and I don't disturb anybody, but I can have it as loud as I want to in my ears. And there's all sorts of headphone amps and gizmos you can run through to amplify into your headphones, and it's just worth trying out a few different things, what's best for you. But if you can hear yourself, then you're going to be able to hear what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, and it's going to help a lot with your practice times. Point 3, play regularly. I'm not saying play lots every day, but play every day. It's so much better for you if you play for just 10-15 minutes a day rather than saving up and playing loads at the weekend. I liken it to running. If you're training, jogging, running, whatever, if you run just a mile a day and you do that 26 times a month, have a few rest days, then you're going to slowly get fitter. But if you only run once a month and you try and run 26 miles to run a marathon a month, your body's not going to cope with that very well. Likewise, when you're playing, if the only time you ever play is when you go out to play a gig, your body's not conditioned to it. You're going to pull out your back with the weight of the bass. You're going to strain your hands with playing. It's so much better if you just play a little and often, just to keep everything working properly. I recommend that absolutely. I do. I don't know. It's between sort of 20 minutes and half an hour playing a day, probably. And I, trim that down when I have to go to rehearsals or play a gig or something. So just try and play a bit every day. Um, Point four will help a lot with that, and that is have a plan. Have a rehearsal plan set out, and I don't want to be prescriptive of that. I have my plan, which I'll go over in a second, but you've got to come up with something that works for you and works for your general life as well, your schedule, depending on how busy you are with everything else. Have a plan and stick to your plan, but don't beat yourself up if you miss a day or two here and there. It's not the end of the world. It's just, really useful guide to help you focus and play well. Now, for what I do, I sort of have it into four sections. I like to start with some technical exercises, so just sort of basic finger exercises to get the hands working and to, loosen up on that. Then I do some more theoretical stuff, sort of running scales, breaking those down into different intervals or modal exercises. Then I like to do some sight reading, which is for a variety of different sources. I've got some various bass books that I like to read along to. If I've had a bass magazine recently, there's always exercises and stuff in there to work along to. And then I like to finish up with some song practice. So there'll always be some songs that I'm learning at the moment. There's lots and lots of songs that I'm playing with the bands that I play with. And it's always good to have those on some sort of playlist that you can just put it on and play along, and it keeps them fresh in your mind. So when you come to actually gig them, then you don't have to worry about trying to remember them too much. So, point five, practice proportionately. And by that, I mean practice what you need to practice. If you're playing in, say, a blues band and all you do at home is practice fancy slap licks, you're not really practicing what you need to do the job that you're doing. And that's not to say don't practice those things, but your practice has to be proportionate to what you're playing for. And really, that leads into the last point, which is have fun. Don't worry about all the stuff that I'm saying about technical exercises. It's useful and important to learn that stuff, but if you play it and it just grinds down on you, change how you're practicing. Find something that works for you, and enjoy it. Enjoy the time you spend with your instrument, and then that gets you into playing more often. When I was starting out, I hated all the technical stuff, and I tried to force myself into doing it, and it didn't work for me at that point in my life. So I had to sort of back off of that, and then I started working really hard on learning lots of different songs. And I learned hours and hours and hours of music, and they got me playing, and that's the most important thing. You don't have to be the most super technical player, but the more time that you spend just with the instrument in your hands, playing whatever you're playing, the better bass player you're going to be. So there's a quick whistle stop tour of some tips to get your rehearsal time effective. Hopefully it's helpful. So, find a way that works for you and enjoy playing.